Get off my property before I call the sheriff." She scoffed, her voice dripping with mockery. "You glorified ditch digger. Tammy, this is my property. The wall you built is 12 feet past my line." Her laughter rang out loud enough to shake her pearl earrings. "Your line? Honey, your line is wherever I say it is. I run this neighborhood." She kept laughing, completely unbothered. "And that little garden of yours," she added with a smirk. "It was an eyesore. I did everyone a favor tearing it out. That garden was my father's," I said, my voice tight. "He built it the summer before he died." "Well, bless his heart," she replied coldly. "Maybe he should have built it somewhere that actually mattered." I stood there in the thick Georgia heat, the scent of fresh mortar, replacing the memory of where my dad's memorial bench once stood. She had timed everything perfectly. 2 weeks. That's all it took for her to bulldoze a dead man's garden and label it beautification. What she didn't realize was that every driveway in her precious subdivision sat on land my grandfather had once owned and what I was about to build on it. My name is Garrett Holloway, and I'm a stonemason. For the past 12 years, I've built walls, patios, and retaining structures all across North Georgia. I understand how stone fits together. I know how weight shifts, how pressure holds, and what it takes to create something that lasts a century. That matters later. The land I live on, 3 acres right in the middle of Creekstone Ridge, has been in my family since 1971. My grandfather bought 40 acres of rolling red clay and pine forest back when Bartow County was nothing but farms and sawmills. Over time, as Atlanta expanded north, pieces of that land were sold off. By the time my father passed, only 3 acres remained, and he left them to me. My father was a quiet man, a carpenter by trade, the kind of man who measured twice and spoke softly. The only time his voice rose was when a board didn't sit right. The summer before cancer took him, he built a memorial garden in the side yard. He laid every stepping stone himself, engraving each one with names from 3 generations of our family. In the center, he planted a dogwood tree and set a stone bench beneath it, carving the armrest with his own hands. That garden was the last thing he ever built. After he was gone, I used to sit there in the evenings, tracing the chisel marks he left behind, listening to crickets, breathing in the honeysuckle growing along the fence line. It was the one place on the property I never touched, because he had already made it perfect. I married Ellie in May. She's an ER nurse, the kind of woman who can handle chaos at 2 in the morning and still make coffee before sunrise. She moved in 3 months before the wedding, and without me saying a word, she understood what that garden meant. She'd sit out there with me on quiet mornings, never suggesting changes, never adding anything. She simply respected it. Now, let me tell you about Tammy Bridgewell. Tammy had been the HOA president of Creekstone Ridge for 7 years, and she ruled it like a prison warden, with a clipboard, a polished smile, and the unshakable belief that everyone owed her something. Mid-50s, blonde, heavy-set, always dressed in linen blazers over yoga pants, like she couldn't decide between a board meeting and a Pilates class. She drove a white Escalade with monogrammed steering wheel and wore perfume strong enough to announce her presence from 10 feet away. For 3 years, she'd been trying to get me to sell my land. She'd show up uninvited, heels clicking against my walkway, sunglasses perched on her head, always opening with the same line. "Garrett, honey, this isn't a farm anymore. It's a neighborhood. Start acting like it." She wanted my 3 acres gone, split into 6 identical houses with matching shutters and HOA-approved mailboxes. Her husband, Wade, was a real estate developer with ties to the county planning office. Together, they circled my land like vultures. And every single time I told them no, then Ellie and I left for our honeymoon. 2 weeks in Savannah, sun, seafood, and the first real break I'd taken in years. We drove away on a Saturday morning, windows down, not knowing Tammy had been waiting for exactly that moment. By Monday, she called an emergency board meeting. By Tuesday, she pushed through a beautification project. By Wednesday, a construction crew was on my land. And by the time I came home, my father's garden was gone. We pulled into driveways Sunday evening, the air thick and humid, that late-May Georgia heat clinging to everything. I was sunburned and relaxed. Ellie was humming along to the radio. Then I saw it, a 6-foot-tall stone wall, stretching 200 feet across my side yard, like someone had drawn a line through my life and claimed everything beyond it. The stone was decorative, tan and gray, the kind developers use at subdivision entrances. Clean, professional, and sitting 12 feet inside my property line. I stopped the truck and just stared. Ellie leaned forward. "Garrett, what is that?" I didn't answer. I walked across the yard to where the garden used to be. The dogwood tree was gone, cut flush to the ground. Sawdust still scattered around the stump, like no one even bothered to clean it up. The stepping stones were tossed into a pile, cracked and stacked like debris. The bench, my father's bench, lay on its side in torn dirt. One armrest snapped clean off. I stood there for a long time. Ellie came up behind me, resting her hand on my back. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. On the other side of the wall, sprinklers hissed to life, watering someone else's lawn. The smell of fresh mortar hung in the heat. That wall was new, still curing. I drove to Tammy Bridgewell's house that evening. She answered the door in a silk robe, coffee mug in hand, like I was some early delivery. She looked me over, smiled, and said, "Oh, you're back. Doesn't the wall look wonderful? It really cleans up that side of the street." I kept my voice steady. "That wall is on my property, Tammy. You destroyed my father's memorial garden." She tilted her head, amused. "Garrett, the board voted on that. Beautification project. 3 days after you left. That area has always been common space. Check your deed if you don't believe me." She took a sip of coffee, told me to have a nice evening, and shut the door in my face. I sat in my truck in her driveway for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, staring into nothing. Then Ellie texted me, "Don't do anything. Come home. We'll figure this out." She was right. The next morning, I called Cal Shepard. Cal was 68, retired, and the best surveyor in Bartow County. He'd worked with my grandfather decades ago. If anyone knew where the true lines were, it was him. He came out Tuesday with his equipment, an old transit level and a modern GPS unit. We walked the boundary together, him checking measurements while I held the rod every 50 feet. He drove a wooden stake into the red clay and tied an orange flag to it. The sound of those stakes hitting the ground was deeply satisfying. When he finished, he wiped his forehead and pointed at the wall. 12 feet and 4 inches, he said. "That's how far inside your line it sits. Son, she didn't just cross your boundary. She erased it. What most people don't know is this. In Georgia, building a permanent structure on someone else's land without permission isn't just civil. It's criminal trespass under state law. It doesn't matter what you thought. If it's not your land and you don't have written consent, you're liable." I thanked Cal and went inside. I sat at the kitchen table and made a list, not an angry list, a careful one. That Thursday, I sent a certified letter, cease and desist. I demanded 3 things: remove the wall within 30 days, restore the garden, and compensate for the damage. No emotion, just facts, measurements, and legal code. Tammy received it Monday. 5 days later, the retaliation began. For HOA violation notices. Grass too long, $200. Unapproved vehicle, my work truck, $300. Paint color violation, $500. Then a lien notice for fines only 3 days old. Ellie read them and said quietly, "She's trying to bury us in paperwork, so we forget about the wall." She was right. This wasn't governance. This was retaliation. Then came the county inspector. He checked everything, shrugged, and said nothing was out of compliance. Whoever filed a complaint wasted his time. I noted the date. Meanwhile, Tammy started a WhatsApp group, posting pictures of my property, calling it a blight, tagging every household. 63 families saw it. I didn't respond. A week later, my neighbor Hank showed me screenshots. "She's done this before," he said. "Push back, and she buries you in fines until you give up." I documented everything, every notice, every fine. Ellie found another one taped to our door after a long shift. She handed it to me silently, then said, "She wants us to explode. Don't give her that." So I didn't. That weekend, I sat in what remained of the garden, the air filled with crickets and honeysuckle. I ran my thumb over the broken bench and thought about what kind of person builds something to last and what kind destroys it without hesitation. That's when I found something. A yellow document in my father's files, a 1998 survey reference sheet mentioning an easement. I didn't understand it yet, but I kept it. 2 weeks later, a law firm sent me an 11-page letter claiming the HOA owned the land through adverse possession. It sounded official, but it was wrong. Georgia law requires 20 years, not 10. The HOA had only existed for 11. Their claim was nonsense. Expensive-looking nonsense, but still nonsense. So I filed it away. Then I started asking a bigger question. Why had the county ignored my complaint? 3 weeks. No response. Then Hank told me something that changed everything. Wade Bridgewell, Tammy's husband, sat on the County Planning Advisory Committee. Suddenly, it all made sense. This wasn't just HOA harassment. This was influence, protection. They had the board, the lawyers, and the county. They weren't just pushing boundaries. They were trying to take my land. That night, I reviewed my security footage. Day 4, Tammy's Escalade pulled up. She directed the crew, pointed at the garden. Then I saw her pick up one of my father's engraved stones, read it, and toss it into a wheelbarrow like trash. I saved everything. Then another truck arrived. Wade stepped out with a rolled-up site plan. They spread it across the hood and pointed at sections of my property. That wasn't beautification. That was planning. I barely slept. The next morning, I took the old survey sheet to Cal. He studied it, then looked up and said, "I remember this. Your grandfather signed it. It was an access easement from 1998, granting the subdivision a 30-foot strip across our land. My grandfather allowed it, but he wasn't foolish. He had conditions. And whatever those conditions were, I had a feeling they were about to change everything.